Welcome, everyone. Today is April 17th, 2019. Welcome to the Evidence-Based Coaching EBC Thought Leaders Webinar with Dr. Annabelle Nelson. Dr. Annabelle will be talking about using archetypal imagery to access deep wisdom in coaching clients. I'm really excited to have Annabelle today on our show. She's very special to me. She is my mentor as well as my dissertation chair. When I was in the HOD PhD program at Fielding and graduated in 2012. So now she's a colleague as a fellow faculty member in HOD, and I'm always excited to see Annabelle and to hear from her. And today she'll be sharing her wisdom with us and how she has been able to really master using archetypal energy. So we're very excited to have you, Annabelle. And I'm going to let Annabelle introduce herself more fully. And Annabelle, if you wouldn't mind sharing your PowerPoint as well with us, that way we can take advantage of your wisdom today. And thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be here for many reasons. I love teaching. I've been here 22 years. I love coaching, and also I love Terry. Terry and I go way back, and it's been a joy to watch him progress. Well, I don't know if he had to progress too much, because when I first met him, he was pretty together. And he is a consummate coach, coaching people all over the planet, as well as very, very specific to high-tech people. So anyway, welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to keep it at an hour. We're not going to use much of your time. And I will give you a little rundown about myself and then go right into the presentation. My name is Annabelle, as you see. I got my PhD in 1978. So I'm a very old lady. And all those years that I've been working, a lot of it has been, how do we access that deep wisdom in each of us, that actualizing tendency, that creating force, that creative force, that learning tendency? How do we harness and allow people's deep wisdom to guide them? Because we know when you coach your clients, you probably see they have so much potential, but how do we get down there and help them use that? How do we create an environment that allows it? So I'm an author, I'm a professor. I've been a professor for about 39 years at Prescott College and at Fielding. I'm a researcher. I've published many articles and presented in places like Cuba and London. I've run a nonprofit. I created it, so I have a social justice mission, particularly with young children. I've worked on Indian nations in Arizona. And also I've taught in India. And yeah, so I also see myself as an explorer. I've traveled the world. I went to Istanbul, to the Hagia Sophia, because I was so enraptured by the archetype of Sophia. So maybe we'll talk about her. We'll see what emerges. So I don't know if you can see my camera, but I have a deck of archetype cards. You can see here. Terry, can people see my camera?
Yes, we can see your cards.
Okay, so I pulled one before we started and I got strength. So I hope that I can embody the characteristic of prowess, which is the characteristic of strength. So let's hope I can do that as we talk today. Oops. Okay. I've already thanked Terry. Thank you so much for hosting this, the director of the evidence-based coaching program at Fielding, a certificate. And as someone just said, they're going to start the HOD program and get a concentration in their doctorate. So thank you, Terry, for the outreach you're doing. And I'm going to do 3 parts today. I know this is kind of a glossy presentation of my work in archetypal imagery, but I hope to give you a few takeaways. So I hope you'll know the definition of an archetype, because a lot of people, when I talk about archetypes, it seems like it just goes whoosh. What in the world is that? I worked with a lot of young people, and I used to try to define it, and I said archetype, like the arch, the the entrance to someplace, that's the archetype, but that didn't work for them. So I kind of gave that up. But anyway, I hope you come away with a definition of archetypes. And then the theory kind of how archetypes act to evoke this deep wisdom in your coaching clients. It's a little bit abstract, a little bit theoretical, but I hope you get kind of a glimmer of that. I'm going to give you a few ways to help your coachees find an archetype. So that's part one. And then part two, doing imagery or thinking in internal sensations is a really amazing way to help people really interact with their archetypes. And also it's a way to relax people, relax the mind, and get them in touch with their deep wisdom. So we're going to do a little imagery, that's point two. And I'm going to give some pointers. So if you take away nothing in your coaching practice today, I hope you take away some pointers for doing imagery. And finally, part three, this is the more maybe esoteric part of how you use imagery, how you bring in an archetype, and how do you evoke a current emotionally charged situation in your client, so it can release energy and give awareness and presence to your client on what they want to do about some emotionally charged situations. So that's the agenda today. I'm going to try to stop about every 15 minutes. And so Terry has said that he will look at the chat. So as I'm talking along, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. Okay, I'm going to start with this story. What happens when you hear a good story? Usually what happens is you see pictures in your mind, and that's imagery. Also, the main character in a story is an archetype. So not only are you starting to think imagistically, the cognitive process of thinking in images, but you're also maybe aligning with an archetype. So this is a story of the sixth blind man, and it takes place in Rajasthan. And a person wanted to find out if people could really understand what an elephant was without actually seeing the elephant. So he brought blind men, and he had them come close and feel the elephant. The first one felt the body and said, "This is a wall." The second one came close and got a hold of the trunk and said, "Oh, it's a snake." Another one grasped one of the legs and said, "Oh, it's a tree." Another one, maybe this was the tall one, got a hold of the ear and said, "Oh, it's a fan." And the final one got the tail and says, "Oh, it's a rope." So I think the point of this story is that as we go through life, our minds are so full of sensory perception, of stories about who we are that we built from a very young age. Are we inadequate? Do we have to show we're strong even when we're feeling vulnerable? And then memories, and then emotional reactions. So most of us go through the world with a very busy mind. And so the idea with using archetypal imagery for coaching to help people contact their deep wisdom is to quiet the mind and allow the deep wisdom within them to give them insight. So that's the aim of this story, or that's the point of this story. Okay, part one, archetypes, what are they? Okay, an archetype is an energy pattern that conveys a given characteristic. Usually we recognize this characteristic right away. So here we have a picture of a statue of Gaia, who's a Greek goddess. And maybe you can look at this picture and think about what characteristic does Gaia portray to you? Just kind of an immediate intuitive thing. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for trying that. So in Gaia's story, she was married to another Greek god, Uranus, and they had many, many offsprings. And some of them were the Cyclops, some of them were the Titans, and they actually had an offspring named Cronus, who was Zeus's father. And so Uranus really didn't like his children very well, and he wanted Gaia to help him kill them. Some of these Greek stories are pretty violent, actually. But in any case, she wouldn't. And she tricked Uranus. She, instead of killing the Cyclops, he was going to eat them, she gave Uranus stones. And Cronus knew that Zeus might become the god, the best god in the Greek mythology. And so he wanted Gaia to get rid of Zeus as well, but she would not. She fooled her son Cronus as well. So Gaia is used a lot as a metaphor for the earth. You maybe seen it in a lot of popular press. But I see Gaia as someone, the characteristic I get from Gaia is protection. Now, an archetype does not have to be a deity or a person or a movie star. An archetype can be a drawing or a symbol of some sort. And so here we have a drawing. It's probably a graphic, not a drawing, but we have a drawing of the brain. So you see the bones there, but you also see the cortex, the gray matter of our cortex, and then you see gears. So I don't know, when you're looking at that image, what characteristic comes to mind. But I use it as the archetype of judgment, that sometimes we're able to make very clear judgment, very analytical judgment. And out of that judgment often comes a new idea, a new way of looking at things. And so the characteristic I've given this image is renewal, that by seeing things clearly, one can come up with a new idea about what to do. However, I do want to say archetypes mean different things to different people, and that's okay. You know, there's been a number of books about archetypes. And there's one about the Greek goddesses. And so some people think there's very specific archetypes and that they have very specific meaning. But no, really, we're tapping into each person's individual deep wisdom. So it's intuitive what you get from that. So I hope we have the definition of archetype. It's the energy pattern that conveys a given characteristic that is usually immediately noticeable. So why do we want to work with archetypes with our coachees? What's the good of it? Well, as you probably have inferred by now, I'm very influenced by humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow. And I'm also influenced by Jungian psychology, which is often called analytic psychology. And so these psychologists have posited that there's something within each of us that will lead us towards health, towards learning, towards clarity. And our job, I think, as coaches, as teachers, I'm a teacher too, is create an environment where we can activate that inner force that's usually out of conscious awareness. Maslow called it the actualizing tendency. Rogers called it the creative force, and Jung called it the deep self with a capital S. So if we can create an environment that allows our coachees to contact that, to feel it, to allow it. Really, you have to allow it. You can't like say, I'm going to contact my creative force. No, you have to allow it to emerge, really, for the insight to pop into your awareness. And this is the access that people have to their own deep wisdom. St. Thomas Aquinas, who was a 13th century theologian, said wisdom is life ability. If you use that word, you're going to get autocorrect. It's not in any dictionary. But I think St. Thomas knew what he was talking about. Life ability is making your life work. And it's not just facts. It's not just knowledge. It's not just experiential learning. But it's also insight. It's also awareness. It's also allowing all of what's inside of you to be available to make your life work. And so archetypes are a way to contact that. And this will show you why. Why is that? Why do archetypes work in this way? Well, in Jungian psychology, we talk about living in front of an archetype. So when we're born, we're not very organized as a being. You know, we just respond to anything going on. And we have a mechanism, a psychodynamic mechanism to organize our personality. And part of that is aligning with an archetype in an unconscious way, if you believe Carl Jung. And if you go to a playground and watch 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds playing, you can see that they seem to be embodying archetype already. We see the heroes, we see the teachers, we maybe see the nurses, the divas, we maybe see the recluses. So I'm pretty convinced that this is actually happening in human psychodynamics, that young people naturally and unconsciously align with an archetype to organize their personality. But over time, the ego gets kind of out of control. Its job, which is excellent, is to give us stability. But it takes over. And so information that maybe the ego considers not in line with stability, or memories or traumatic experiences, the ego will keep all this at bay. And our friend Freud, good old Freud, who we can criticize well, but he had a few good insights. And one thing he did say was the ego will fight tooth and nail to keep our consciousness out of our unconscious, where our deep self is, our deep wisdom. And so we need a way to get there. We need a way to help our clients touch this deep self, which is actually our wisdom. And so helping you, so we live in front of our archetype. So there's an archetype already organizing us. So we can, instead of choosing archetype, we could say, we could discover an archetype. But I'll show you shortly how archetypes are very flexible. So it doesn't have to be a very given archetype. It can change, it can be playful. What's fun about using archetypes with your clients is you can almost make it imaginal, intuitive, and playful. So that the stress of opening the deep wisdom, like, oh, we're doing something serious, you don't have to do that. So how do you help your clients find an archetype? Well, I have some tools. I have this book, Archetypal Imagery and the Spiritual Self, Techniques for Counselors and Coaches, available on Amazon. And at the back of that book are some quizzes. I have cards that you've already seen. I have a coloring book. But I also currently on my website have a quiz. So there's 27 statements, and the person goes through all of them, and they just choose one. And again, it's very important to be playful about archetypes. It's not the serious business. And if you choose a statement, it will take you to an archetype. So that's one tool. And then one thing about archetypes, it's good to interact with them in some way. I'm going to hopefully show you some imagery tonight on how to interact with an archetype if we have time. But also I have coloring pages on the book. If you get one of your coachees to select an archetype, you can also have them do research, look it up on Google. For example, well, you'll see the various archetypes I've chosen. And there's other people that choose different archetypes. But if you put one in, for example, I showed you that picture of the brain with the gears, and I put judgment in there. So if you put judgment in Google, a lot of things will come forth. So they can look for pictures, they can look for stories. Marie-Louise von Franz is a famous Jungian psychoanalyst, and she has this paradox that every archetype contains every other archetype. Those kind of paradoxes sort of blow my mind. But I kind of visualize an archetype as a prism. And we have our conscious mind that's very busy, has anxiety, worries, is trying to figure out problems, also has these stories about who we are that is projecting on what we perceive. And I kind of see the archetype as a prism between our conscious worried mind. I know many of you aren't worried. I don't want to imply that, but our conscious busy mind, most of our minds are busy, that there's a prism there, and there's many facets on the prism, and each facet is an archetype, is an energy pattern, and any one will get us into the middle, which will contact our deep wisdom. So I'm going to stop here, Terry, and see if anyone's posted any questions.
No questions yet, Annabelle, and I'm sure there will be some at the end for sure.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for listening. Okay, part 2, imagery. So I'm going to do a short imagery exercise, and what I'm presenting tonight is 2-pronged. First is about archetypes, how to choose them, what they are, how they work within the mind. And the second prong is imagery. How do you use imagery? And hopefully then we'll bring the two together in part 3, imagery and archetypes. So at this point, I'd like to lead us in a short imagery. So I started some music, and Terry, you can let me know if it's too loud or too soft.
That's perfect.
Okay, so we're going to take a little break. I used to do imagery a lot with many different organizations. And one was the school secretaries of Arizona. And I did imagery with them, and they said, "Is this like napping?" And I said, "Yeah, this is like napping." So this is a time just to settle into your body. We're a mind body. We're not a mind and a body. So try to settle into your body. Put your feet on the floor and cross your legs. Think about the contact your feet have with your shoes and the floor. Think about how your body's sitting on a chair and the contact of your body with the chair. And feel your whole body getting heavier and warmer. About your right foot, your big toe, second, third, fourth, and fifth toe. Relax your foot, your calf on your right leg. Go underneath your right kneecap, your right quadricep, which is your thigh bone. It's the biggest muscle in your body. So if you can relax your thigh, whoa, that can relax the rest of your body. Good job. Some people are doing that. Relax your left foot, your left big toe, second, third, fourth little toe. Relax your left calf, go underneath your left knee bone. Relax your left quadricep, that thigh muscle that's so huge that keeps you upright. Good. You feel your legs getting heavier and warmer. Think about your right hip joint. The thing about imagery is that when you image multisensory, meaning many senses, visual, kinesthetic, tactile, auditory, olfactory, your brain interprets that as you're actually moving. So think about your left hip socket. You don't actually have to move it, but you can see it in your mind's eye. You can see it open slightly. It's not actually moving, but it's in your mind's eye. It's opening slightly. Good. Relax your left hip socket. See the ball in the socket. Good. Relax that. Relax your groin and your stomach. Relax your lungs. Your lungs are very big organs. They go down low in your back. They go up to your clavicle. And breathing is the ultimate receptive act. If you make space, air moves in. So in your next inhalation, imagine your rib cage. Imagine your sternum softening and your rib cage moving out towards your arms. Good. So inhale and exhale. Relax your right hand, your right thumb, index, middle, ring, little finger. Relax your right arm. Think about your right shoulder joint, that ball and socket. Open that in your mind's eye. Relax your left hand, your left thumb, index, middle, ring, little finger. Good. Relax your left arm, go up to that left shoulder socket, open it. Excellent. Take your attention to the base of your spine. Pretend your attention has fingers. And go up your spine. Restacking your vertebrae. Vertebrae aren't really connected. They're held together by the spinal column that goes between them. So there could actually be movement between your vertebrae. Think about the base of your neck. Relax that. Relax your shoulders. We carry so much weight about our lives on our shoulders. Relax the back of your head, the top of your head. Your eyes are heavy marbles that flow into your back of your head. Relax your cheeks. Unlock your jaw. Relax your tongue. Your whole body's feeling heavier and warmer. Now imagine that you're in an outside setting where you've been before that you like. It could be the woods, it could be the backyard, it could be a beach. You've been there before and you felt okay there. And at this moment in time, you're not really happy, you're not really sad, you're just feeling okay. For the next 3 minutes where we do this imagery, there's nothing to worry about. No finances, no relationships, no jobs to be done, no schoolwork. You're feeling relaxed and okay. You find a place to sit down to make yourself comfortable, and you look at the colors around you. Maybe greens, maybe browns. You look at the sky and the clouds. Good. You immerse yourself in the setting. And you notice some movement. An entity is coming to see you, and it's okay. It's not scary. The entity coming to see you means you well. Could be an animal, could be a deity, could be someone you know or a relative. It could be someone who's passed. It could be a magical creature. Let that entity come to you, and it can come as close as you want, as far away as you want. And use all your senses, colors, shapes, textures. And now let that image complete itself. Maybe you got a gift. Maybe you have a feeling from that interaction somewhere in your body. And bring it forward to this time and space. And come back to this time and space. Come back to seeing us on the Zoom. Maybe some people could share and put in the chat what they saw. Okay, we have Teresa. Teresa saw Lady Godiva. Thanks for sharing, Teresa. And good to have you on the Zoom tonight. Anyone else would like to share? And Shanna said a hand, like tarot aces, bringing wind. Wow. The Phoenix, Lori saw this Phoenix, strong and powerful. Lee says a large white horse. Hi, Lee, it's so good to have you tonight. Lee is my mentee, and she has done archetypal imagery with me a lot. So it's great to have you here, Lee. Serenity, power, regal, a large white horse. Eva, I hope I'm saying your name right. Maybe it's Eva. A friend. Yeah, an archetype doesn't have to be some magical creature. An A, Link, a wolf cub. I love that. A yearling. Well, thank you. Terry, I'll let you keep watching the chat, see if we have some more people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for participating. So as coaches, many of you probably use imagery already. And so maybe you can teach me some things. I spent about 8 years studying imagery, the cognitive process of imagery, and traveled to Japan to do workshops and did quite a bit of research, which you can see on my website, abelnelson.com. And I'll just share with you my wisdom about leading imagery. Of course, mindfulness is on, what shall we say, on the headline today. People are really interested in mindfulness. And I attended a health workshop. It was actually a retreat, the Optimal Health Institute in San Diego. And they said, we're going to do alpha now. And if you know anything about brain waves, alpha, when our brain is emitting alpha waves, it's relaxed and focused. So like beta is like energetic, trying to get things done. Delta is when we're deeply asleep. And so alpha is what you want for meditation, relaxation, mindfulness. But I didn't think they did alpha very well. They say, okay, now we're doing alpha, relax, now see this. So I do think imagery is a process. So I think using music helps. Our body entrains to the music we hear. Entrainment means that our body's rhythms will try to match that rhythm. So if you have music that's 60 beats a minute, your body will try to entrain to that. As you notice in this imagery, I spent a lot of time relaxing your body. And I think you can decide how much to do that. I think it helps. I think it helps to take time. As I said, we're a mind body and we want body awareness. So I think that you have more vivid imagery the more relaxed someone is. So move awareness into the body. Now the real key with vivid imagery is make it multisensory. So I did it a bit. I could have maybe improved on my multisensory, but you want visual, you want auditory. I actually didn't do any olfactory, like what did you smell? But I try to do tactile, the touch out, and kinesthetic to move in the imagery. So multisensory is very important. And there are data that if you have multisensory imagery, the mind perceives that you're actually doing it. So if you've watched the Olympics, you will see luge athletes practicing before they do a luge run, and you see them, they're closing their eyes and going, And what are they doing? They're imaging it. So we know from physical education research that imagery can improve performance almost as much as actually doing it. Details of the scene is important. And one little trick I do is I often image it with you. So that allows me to do the right pace, like I'm not going so fast, and I'm spending some wait time here and there. So actually visualizing when you're telling other people to visualize. And then I think it's important to close imagery, because we're opening the unconscious mind where the deep wisdom is, right? And so we don't want a lot of stuff coming out of the unconscious that a person's not ready for, particularly in coaching when we have to have the boundary with therapeutic work. So some way to close it, to come back here and now, to have the music decrease over time. So you want to kind of tidy up the mind. The Marie Kondo approach to imagery is we're tidying up at the end. So if you have any questions about imagery, we'll let Terry monitor the chat here in case someone has any questions. No? Okay, we'll keep going. So the part 3, and we're at 5:42, so I think I have a few minutes, right, Terry? And again, we're glossing over, and I've actually trained people in this, which takes a little bit of time. I have ICF CEE approval to do 5.5 hours on this. So I'm hoping either to do a webinar on that or possibly do it in a few locations. So now you've learned what an archetype is, and I've given you a few ideas about how to help your clients choose one. And actually you chose one, right, in what we just did. We've got a wolf, we have Lady Godiva. I kind of like to be Lady Godiva. And so remember, the archetype conveys a main characteristic. Of course, archetypes are quite complex, but that characteristic is what you want to help your client embody in having life ability, Thomas Aquinas's word for wisdom, in their own life. So the purpose of choosing an archetype, and then we're gonna, I don't know if we'll have time to image one, is to help them embody that characteristic of that archetype, bring it into present time to give them awareness and presence about what they want to do in a situation. I have this model of the wise mind body. And in this model, there are 4 bodies: the spiritual body, and I'm talking about the human spirit, not necessarily a religious view of spirituality, but more that we as humans have a spirit. So there's the spirit body, the physical body, the emotional body, and then the mind. And usually the mind is very closed and very busy, as we've talked about. So hopefully with helping our clients do archetypal imagery, we're softening the mind. So as the ego fighting tooth and nail to keep us away from deep wisdom, as Freud says, we're softening the mind and allowing information coming from the emotional body, excuse me, the emotional body, the physical body, and the energetic spiritual realm as well. So I know there's a lot contained in this model. I'm not going to go into it tonight, but I'd be happy to do email with any of you on it. And I do talk about it a little bit more in the book. So part of the assumptions of this work come from humanistic psychology and Jungian psychology. The current emotionally charged situations are tied to issues in the unconscious that are skewing individuals' perception of what is, and or keeping them away from their power, their presence and awareness of seeing what they want to do in that situation. And so there's a way of using imagery where you have people image a certain situation where something happened that they didn't like. and you use all of these skills of imagery, taking them back to that situation. Where were they? Who was there? What was happening? And using all their senses. And then what I do is have them find where they feel the most within their body and visualize that. And what I'm trying to do is keep them working on a deep wisdom level, as opposed to trying to go to their cognitive mind to figure out what's happening. And then in the imagery, I'll have them bring the archetype they've chosen into that situation to see what they want to do about it. So I'm trying to figure out, usually I'm having a dialogue on this, so I'm a little handicapped in presenting in this realm that I can't ask one of you to give me a situation. But let's pretend that I'm your coach and we've had many situations together, many sessions, and over time you've chosen the archetype of the world. And the main characteristic I put on the world, which would vary depending on you and what you're bringing to that situation. But right now, let's say I'm your coach, you're my coachee. You've chosen the world, and we've decided that its main characteristic is fulfillment. So why don't you each think of a situation? Usually we do imagery, but of course we just have an hour tonight. So I'll abbreviate that a little. But think of a situation in the last couple of weeks where you've had emotion that you didn't like so well. And see if you could visualize that just a little, like where you were, what was happening. See if you can use all your senses, like if you're in a living room, are you on a couch, what color the couch is. I know this seems silly, but that's the way you vivify imagery. You bring in the senses. And then see if you can find a place in your body where you're feeling the most. It's often in our stomach. Sometimes our head is just feeling like it's gonna explode. Sometimes our throat is very constricted. Sometimes we feel like we're whirling around inside. And let's say at that moment in time, you can embody the world archetype. You can embody fulfillment. You feel fulfilled as a human at this moment in time. You're reliving the situation. How might you see this situation differently? What might you say differently? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll just give you an example of what I did right then. There was a situation with my daughter this week, and I felt like she was judging me and correcting me, and I was tired of it. And I actually felt this really intense energy in my head, like I wanted to scream, or maybe even something whirling around inside. And when I brought in fulfillment, that I'm a fulfilled being, I just felt I love her. And my shoulders went down. I relaxed. I could watch it a bit. Well, if you did participate that, thank you. So I do have scripts for some of these imagery exercises that we've done tonight, at least, and more. But this might be a script for what we just did in a very abbreviated way. So I brought fulfillment into that whirling energy in my head. So hopefully that gives you a little glimpse of how, once you get someone to find an archetype, once you teach them to relax, how you can then use the imagery type exercise to bring that archetype into present time with them, to release some of these emotional patterns that are keeping people from their full potential, how they can use their deep wisdom to choose how they want to be in some of these difficult or emotionally charged situations. And as coaches, you know, this happens a lot at work. There's a lot of emotions that are dodging around, zapping around. Well, I'd like to end my presentation. And one archetype I've worked over my life, as I told you earlier, I taught in India. And Ganesha is an elephant god in India. And I'm using some of these deities from a psychological perspective, not from a perspective. I hope that's clear. So Ganesha is an elephant god, and he was protecting his mother, who was a god to Parvati, and she was a paramour of Shiva, the god of destruction in the Hindu triumvirate. And he was just being a good son, right? Protecting his mom. I think she was taking a bath, actually, in the story, and Shiva comes along. Thank you. He takes Ganesha's head, and Parvati's very upset. So he says, get me another head. Get me a head for my son. And Shiva brings an elephant head. And so that's Ganesha. And Ganesha is the remover of obstacles. And Ganesha is the helper. So I wish this archetype to all of you, that Ganesha can come and remove your obstacles as a coach, and also be a help to you as you do your coaching practice. So thank you very much for your time this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Nelson.